The Joe Rogan Experience.
You saw this Trader Joe's story, right?
You were telling me earlier.
This is wild. So Trader Joe's is called Trader Joe's, right? Which is not racist, I guess. But apparently they have Mexican products that they were calling Trader Jose's. And some bored person in their basement decided to create a petition that got signed by some 2,400 other bored people about why it shouldn't be called Trader Jose's because that's racist. Mm-hmm. So apparently it's cultural appropriation if you're Trader Joe's and you make a burrito. But if you call it Trader Jose's, then that's... I think they called it exoticizing Mexican people.
Exoticizing?
Yeah, it's making them exotic and other. So Trader Joe's pulled it down. Trader Joe's is gonna not use this anymore.
17-year-old called out. 17-year-old called out Trader Joe's. Now the chain is dropping offensive labeling.
Offensive to whom? Like, how many Hispanics were picketing outside Trader Joe's being, now that I saw that Trader Jose beer.
Right. Listen, I'm Italian. Do you think Papa Gino's, is that really, is that really an Italian who made that company? Like, how many different, different pizza companies and all these, not run by Italians at all?
Honestly, God, I'd love to see the racial breakdown of the people who signed this petition. I would bet 90% of them are white.
Yeah,
90%, right?
White, live in the suburbs, hate their parents. Yeah. What did you say? What was the word they used for it?
Exoticizing.
Exoticizing.
I think, was what they said, yeah.
Oh my God, that is so adorable. Exoticizing. I was talking to you about Rick Bayless, who's a famous chef of Mexican cuisine, who is a white man who adores Mexican food. I mean, I love the guy. I love listening to his videos. I love Mexican food. So watching this guy's videos, it's like I love someone who's really into something. I get a kick out of even like there's a guy I used to watch on PBS that would make furniture with ancient tools. Like he'd use like ancient different old-timey saws and chisels and shit, and he would make these wooden chairs and tables and furniture.
It's just called the Amish, right? I mean,
but he kind of looked like that. But he was really dressed like an old-timey guy, and he had this old-timey shop, and he would make this stuff. And I loved watching him, and I don't give a fuck about his shitty furniture. I don't. But what I cared about was the fact that this guy was really passionate about his thing, and it was very attractive to me. And I feel the same way when I watch this guy, Rick Bayless, talk about Mexican cuisine. He loves it. He takes regular trips to Mexico and learns how to cook these dishes in the traditional way, and then he talks about it with this great passion. But the guy just got shit all over. They were just like, you're culturally appropriating. You shouldn't be doing this. You're a white man.
Let me just say this generally. Cultural appropriation is a bunch of horseshit. And the reason it's a bunch of horseshit is because, you know what's the best in life? All the things that are good from everybody else's culture. Like, the reason people live in major cities is to go to all the different restaurants from all of the different cultures.
Yes.
Like, why is cultural... I'm so confused as to why cultural appropriation is bad. Cultural appropriation is the greatest thing that has ever happened to planet Earth.
Yes.
If we were all siloed off into our own little cultures, you know how much things would suck? They would just be terrible. So this kind of stuff is just crazy.
Drives me nuts. I grew up teaching Taekwondo, which is a Korean martial art. I learned to count in Korean. I had to speak all the techniques in Korean.
Because you hate Koreans. That's clearly the problem here.
I culturally appropriated the shit out of my childhood.
Yeah, exactly. This is all crazy, and there's no apparent end to it. Like, there's no limiting principle.
There's no limit. There's no limit.
I read a column this morning by somebody, I think it was in the Washington Post, saying that we should just keep changing the name of everything. Like, literally, forever. We should just keep changing the name of everything. She said, there was this town, and I think I found a non-offensive name for the town, but if I found something else that was offensive, like 3 years from now, we should change the name of the town. I just thought, okay, so we are living in 1984, right? Orwell talked about renaming everything.
Man, people will find a way. They'll find a way to be mad.
Well, here's my controversial statement, okay?
Okay.
My controversial statement is, if you have to go this far to find things to be offended over, there's not that much to be offended over. If you have to go so far that you have to be offended by Trader Jose's, you got nothing going on in your life. There's a dramatic demand for being offended and acting like a victim. And there just ain't, like, there are actual victims in this country.
Yes.
And internationally, there are seriously actual victims.
Yes.
But we don't focus on any of those folks, right?
No.
We focus instead on, like, the dumbest bullcrap you ever heard. About renaming libraries. And listen, I'm fine with, you want to take a Confederate statue and put it in a museum? Fine. I mean, those guys were jerks. They're terrible people. Fine, go for it. But, like, you're talking about, we're going to fix the world by renaming Washington, D.C. because Washington was bad. It's like, what did you do lately? Did you do what Washington did? Like, I understand, we don't put up statues to people for all the bad crap they did. Martin Luther King had a real bad record with the ladies. Okay, we don't put up statues to Martin Luther King because we were saying he was great with women.
I think everybody was bad with women back then.
Everyone
just
is
how
bad,
it
period.
was done.
Human beings suck. Okay, so either get rid of all the statues or recognize that human beings suck.
Worse, obviously.
For
Some
sure.
of them
And
suck
there are
worse.
gradations of suck.
Do
But
you remember back when they were tearing down those Civil War statues and Trump, in all of his wisdom, was like, what are they going to do next? What about Lincoln? What about they're going to take down George Washington? And everybody's like, oh, he's so crazy. Meanwhile, that's exactly what they were doing. That was what they were doing. In Chicago, well, that was actually Christopher Columbus, who was legitimately a bad guy.
he was, I mean, yes.
Yeah.
Also, everyone was bad. Like, literally all the people, like, enslavement, brutal treatment of people.
Right.
Fairly commonplace.
But do you think there's an argument to be said that maybe we shouldn't celebrate those bad people anymore now that we know what they really were?
Not
all
really. I
about?
think we should just talk about the bad people. Like, I don't
Right.
think we're the only good people in history.
Right,
I think
do you think
there's
they should have a statue of Genghis Khan?
I don't know. What did Genghis Khan do that was good, that had good results?
Well, he opened up trade to China.
Okay, if you want to put up a trade to China statue for Genghis
But he
Khan
also
at the Trade
killed
Federation.
10% of the population.
Yeah, true enough. And
Yeah.
what? Impregnated the other 10% or something? It's
he
something
fucked
wild.
everybody. he literally raped his way through Asia.
The point of a Christopher Columbus statue is not all the bad things he did to the Arawaks. The point of a Christopher Columbus statue is we are glad that Western civilization came to the Western Hemisphere. I kind of agree with that principle. I think it is a good thing that Western civilization came to the Western Hemisphere. And yes, there was a lot of brutality. And yes, there was a lot of cruelty. And we should talk about all those things. But this notion that the only cruelty that has ever existed in human history came at the behest of Western civilization, that everything was a Rousseauian paradise before Christopher Columbus came, that Christopher Columbus doesn't deserve a statue in specific, that we should, that like, either make the argument that everybody was a product of their time and therefore no one deserves a statue, or recognize that when there's a statue of Christopher Columbus, we are not honoring how he treated the Arawaks. No one ever thought that we put up a statue to Christopher Columbus because he was really sweet to the natives on the other end of that. Right? That nobody's.
So what is the purpose of a statue? Like when you have a Christopher Columbus statue, like what is the purpose of that statue? We all know who he is. We all know what he did. Why do we have an enormous bronze version of him in the middle of a park?
I mean, presumably to say that Western civilization arriving here was a good thing,
Well,
right?
it's
Or to have the conversation. I mean,
Yeah.
that's
It's a monument to an historical event, right?
right. Or listen, Columbia University is named after Columbus, right? The idea of America as Columbia, right, which was an alternative name for America, was after Columbus because he was a discoverer.
Well, that's a weird one, right? We're named after Amerigo Vespucci, who nobody knows who the fuck that guy is.
Yeah, he's been lost in the time.
He's totally been lost.
But there is this idea
Yeah.
that has settled in that and it's really of high irritation to me that we are now the only good people who have ever lived. Everyone who came before us was just a horrible person, and we are the only good humans who have ever, like, isn't the world lucky to have us? We're the only people who have ever lived who are completely sinless, and we can look from our perch at the top of morality at everyone who came before us and say that those people were all garbage compared to us. Now, there were people who were garbage compared to us, but I really don't think that Washington was among the people who you can say was garbage compared to you. Like, I don't think that you living in 1770 are a better person than George Washington. I think you stand atop the legacy that George Washington helped build.